You feel like you're always fighting battles you never wanted at work, with people, even in simple daily situations, yet you keep losing to others who seem to get what they want without even trying. Every day you're either avoiding fights or jumping into ones you can't win, while others handle the same problems with ease. I am Sun Tzu, and I learned how to win without fighting. For over 2,500 years, my ideas have helped leaders win every kind of battle. What I'll teach you will change how you handle problems in your daily life, so you can get what you want while others waste their energy fighting. The same tricks that won wars can help you win your everyday battles, whether you're dealing with difficult people, getting ahead at work, or just keeping your peace. But first, like this video, subscribe for more wisdom, and comment where you're watching from. I want to see which parts of the world are ready to learn how to win in everyday life. When I first received my military commission scrolled, precious document that would change my understanding of human nature forever, was young and foolish. I believed that victory came from strength, that the loudest voice won arguments, and that force could solve any problem. I was wrong about everything. My first command was a disaster waiting to happen. I had soldiers who questioned every order, enemies who seemed to anticipate my every move, and superiors who doubted my abilities. I was fighting everyone and winning nothing. Sound familiar? That's exactly how most people live their daily lives, constantly battling, constantly exhausted, constantly frustrated. The turning point came during my first real conflict. Instead of charging into battle like I wanted to, my mentor forced me to wait. For 3 days, we observed our opponents. We watched how they moved, when they ate, where they posted guards, how they treated each other. By the 3rd day, I knew more about my enemy than they knew about themselves. That's when I learned my first great lesson. Most battles are won before they're fought. The side with better information, better positioning, and better timing wins, not the side with bigger muscles or louder voices. This principle works whether you're facing an army or facing a difficult co-worker who always tries to take credit for your ideas. I remember studying one particular opponent, general famous for his aggressive attacks. Everyone feared him because he seemed unpredictable and violent. But after watching him for weeks, I discovered his pattern. He attacked when he felt cornered, retreated when he felt confident, and made his worst decisions when he was angry. Once I understood this, defeating him became simple. I just had to create the right conditions and let him defeat himself. This taught me that understanding people matters more than overpowering them. That difficult person in your life, they have patterns too. That boss who seems impossible to please, they have triggers and motivations you can learn to read. That family member who always starts arguments, they're following a script you can predict and redirect. My early years were filled with small victories that taught me big lessons. I learned that the general who won battles without fighting was respected more than the one who won through bloodshed. I discovered that soldiers would follow leaders who protected them from unnecessary fights, not leaders who threw them into every conflict. I realized that reputation and positioning could accomplish what force never could. But the most important lesson came from my greatest early defeat. I had ignored my own advice and rushed into a battle I wasn't prepared for. My pride had convinced me I could win through pure determination. Instead, I lost good soldiers and nearly lost my command. Sitting in my tent that night, surrounded by the wounded and the grieving, I understood something that would guide me for the rest of my life. Every unnecessary battle you fight weakens you for the battles that truly matter. From that moment, I became obsessed with efficiency. Why fight 10 battles when you could achieve the same result with 1? Why make enemies when you could make allies? Why use force when intelligence could accomplish more? These questions shaped every decision I made from then on. I developed what I came to call strategic patience. the ability to wait for the right moment, instead of reacting to every provocation. I learned to study situations like a scholar studies texts, looking for patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities that others missed. Most importantly, I learned that winning without fighting wasn't just more elegant, it was more effective. The young man who received that first commission scroll thought victory meant defeating others. The strategist I became understood that true victory meant achieving your goals while making as few enemies as possible. This mindset didn't just make me a better military commander, it made me a better person, a better leader, and ultimately a better teacher of these timeless principles. Every morning before dawn, I would hold up my bronze mirror of self-reflection, not to admire my appearance, but to look honestly at the person staring back at me. This daily ritual taught me the most difficult lesson any warrior can learn. You cannot defeat external enemies until you understand your internal ones. Most people skip this step entirely. They rush into conflicts without knowing their own strengths and weaknesses, like a general marching into battle without knowing how many soldiers he commands. I learned this the hard way when my own anger cost me a crucial negotiation. I thought I was being strong and decisive, but I was actually being emotional and predictable. My opponent used my impatience against me, and I walked away with nothing. That failure taught me to develop what I call honest self-assessment. Every evening, I would review my day and ask myself hard questions. Where did I react instead of respond? When did my emotions make decisions for me? What patterns keep repeating in my conflicts? Which of my behaviors consistently create problems? You must do the same thing in your daily life. Are you the person who always takes things personally? Do you interrupt others when they're speaking? Do you avoid difficult conversations until they become crises? Do you say yes when you mean no? These patterns are your personal vulnerabilities, and other people will exploit them whether they realize it or not. I discovered I had 3 major weaknesses. I underestimated opponents who appeared less intelligent. I became impatient when progress seemed slow, and I trusted too quickly when people told me what I wanted to hear. Once I knew these things about myself, I could guard against them. I started taking extra time to study simple opponents, building buffer time into all my plans, and always seeking second opinions on decisions that aligned too perfectly with my preferences. But self-knowledge isn't just about identifying weaknesses, about understanding your true strengths. I realized I was exceptional at reading subtle changes in people's behavior. I could remain calm under pressure when others panicked, and I had an unusual ability to see long-term consequences of short-term decisions. These became my most powerful weapons. Your strengths might be different. Maybe you're naturally good at making people feel heard and understood. Perhaps you excel at breaking complex problems into manageable pieces. You might have a gift for seeing opportunities that others miss. Whatever your natural abilities are, you must identify them clearly and learn to use them strategically. The key is building confidence through accurate self-awareness, not through false beliefs about yourself. Confidence based on delusion crumbles under pressure. Confidence based on honest self-knowledge grows stronger through every challenge. I created a simple system for this. Each week, I would identify one behavior that was working for me and one that was working against me. I would practice strengthening the helpful behavior and replacing the harmful one. This gradual approach prevented me from trying to change everything at once, which never works. True self-knowledge also means understanding your emotional triggers. What types of people or situations make you react without thinking? For me, it was people who questioned my competence in front of others. Once I recognized this trigger, I could prepare for it and respond strategically instead of defensively. Remember, the person who knows themselves and their opponent will win most of their battles. The person who knows only their opponent will win some battles. The person who knows neither themselves nor their opponent will lose every time. Start with the mirror. My intelligence network scroll contained detailed information about every opponent I faced, not just their military strength, but their personal habits, fears, ambitions, and relationships. I learned that information gathering beats confrontation every single time. While others prepared weapons, I prepared knowledge. The first rule of reading people is simple. Everyone wants something. Your job is to figure out what that something is. Is your difficult coworker trying to prove their worth to get promoted? Is your argumentative neighbor feeling ignored and just wants attention? Is that demanding customer actually scared that they'll be taken advantage of? Once you understand what people really want, you can predict their behavior and respond appropriately. I once faced a rival general who seemed completely unpredictable. His attacks appeared random, his retreats made no logical sense, and his negotiations were inconsistent. Other commanders were frustrated because they couldn't develop a strategy against him. But I spent weeks studying him differently, not just his military moves, but his personal story. I discovered he had grown up poor and been mocked by wealthy officers early in his career. Every random attack targeted commanders from privileged backgrounds. Every retreat happened when he felt outclassed socially, not militarily. His negotiation style changed based on whether he felt respected or dismissed. Once I understood his emotional drivers, I could work with him instead of against him. We ended up as allies because I treated him as an equal from the start. This same principle applies to every difficult person in your life. That boss who micromanages everything. They might have been burned by trusting others before. That friend who always changes plans at the last minute. They could be struggling with anxiety about making the wrong choice. That family member who criticizes everything you do. They might feel like their own accomplishments haven't been recognized. I developed specific techniques for gathering this intelligence. First, I listened to what people complained about, not just their surface complaints, but the emotions underneath. Second, I paid attention to what made them light up with enthusiasm. Third, I noticed who they talked about with respect and who they dismissed. These patterns revealed their values, fears, and motivations. Another powerful technique is watching how people treat those with less power than them. How does your colleague speak to the janitor? How does your date treat the restaurant server? How does your boss interact with their assistant? These interactions reveal their true character. Because they think these behaviors don't matter. I also learned to identify what I call weak points, not to exploit them maliciously, but to understand them strategically. Everyone has topics that make them emotional, situations that stress them out, and decisions they consistently struggle with. When you know these weak points, you can either avoid triggering them during important conversations or address them gently to build trust. But here's the crucial part. Use empathy as your strategic advantage. When you truly understand why someone behaves the way they do, you stop taking their actions personally. That aggressive person isn't attacking you, they're defending themselves from something you can't see. That withdrawn person isn't ignoring you, they're protecting themselves from past hurts. This understanding transforms how you respond to difficult people. Instead of matching their energy or avoiding them completely, you can address their underlying needs while still protecting your own interests. You can diffuse conflicts by acknowledging their concerns, redirect their behavior by appealing to their motivations, and even turn opponents into allies by showing them how cooperation serves their goals. Remember, information is power, but understanding is wisdom. Gather information about people, not to manipulate them, but to work with human nature instead of against it. When you understand what drives people, you can influence outcomes without creating enemies. On my battle selection criteria stone tablet, I carved these words: every battle you fight that doesn't need to be fought makes you weaker for the battles that do. This wisdom came from watching too many good soldiers die in conflicts that accomplished nothing except satisfying someone's pride. Strategic withdrawal is not cowardice, intelligence. I once retreated from a battle I could have won because winning would have cost me half my army and gained me worthless territory. My enemies called me a coward, but 6 months later, when they needed help against a common threat, my army was strong enough to save them. They learned the difference between appearing weak and actually being weak. You face this same choice every day. When your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting, do you call them out immediately and create an enemy, or do you document everything and address it strategically later? When someone cuts in front of you in line, do you start an argument with a stranger you'll never see again, or do you save your energy for something that actually matters? I developed a simple test for every potential conflict. Will winning this battle move me closer to my larger goals? Or will it just make me feel better temporarily? If the answer is just feeling better, I don't fight. Feeling good for 5 minutes isn't worth the energy, time, and relationships that conflicts always cost. Let me tell you about a battle I chose not to fight. A neighboring commander constantly insulted my strategies in front of other officers. Everyone expected me to challenge him to prove my worth. Instead, I studied why he felt the need to diminish me. I discovered he was insecure about his own tactical knowledge and was trying to build himself up by tearing me down. Rather than confront him directly, I started asking him for advice on minor tactical questions. I praised his insights publicly. When they were good and ignored his insults completely, within weeks, he stopped attacking me because he no longer felt threatened. He even started defending me to others because he felt invested in my success. This taught me that many battles disappear when you remove the motivation for fighting. People often attack not because they hate you, but because they're afraid, insecure, or feeling powerless. Address the underlying emotion, and the surface conflict often resolves itself. But some battles must be fought. How do you know which ones? First, if someone is actively blocking your progress toward important goals, you must act. Second, if someone is harming people you're responsible for protecting, you cannot ignore it. Third, if staying silent will be interpreted as agreement with something harmful, you must speak up. The key is fighting smart, not just fighting hard. Before engaging in any conflict, ask yourself, what's the minimum force needed to achieve my actual objective? Can I solve this problem by changing the situation instead of changing the person? Is there a way to let them save face while giving me what I need? Remember the power of saying no. Every time you say yes to a small battle, you're saying no to your energy being available for a big opportunity. Protect your resources like a general protects his best troops. Spend them only when the victory truly matters. My strategic position map showed something that changed how I thought about every conflict. The army that controls the high ground wins before the battle starts. Position matters more than strength, more than numbers, more than weapons. This principle applies to every interaction in your daily life. Think about your workplace. Where do you sit in meetings? Do you choose a seat where you can see everyone's reactions? Or do you take whatever chair is left? Do you position yourself near decision makers during informal conversations? Or do you stay safely in the background? These choices determine how much influence you have before you even speak. I learned this lesson during a crucial negotiation early in my career. I was younger and less experienced than my opponents, so I knew I needed every advantage. Instead of meeting in their territory where they would feel confident, I suggested a neutral location. Instead of sitting across from them like adversaries, I arranged the seating so we were all facing the same direction. Looking at maps and documents together, this simple positioning change transformed the entire dynamic. Instead of feeling like they were being challenged by an upstart, they felt like we were collaborating to solve a shared problem. They started offering compromises I never would have gotten in a traditional confrontation. Set up that you can use this same strategy in your daily life. When you need to have a difficult conversation with someone, don't ambush them at their desk where they feel defensive. Don't corner them in a hallway where they feel trapped. Instead, suggest grabbing coffee in a neutral space where you can sit side by side and discuss the situation as two reasonable people solving a problem together. Timing your position is equally important. I once won a major victory simply by waiting for my opponent to commit to a bad position before revealing my true strength. He had backed himself into terrain that looked good but was actually a trap. When I finally acted, he had no room to maneuver and had to accept my terms. In workplace politics, this means positioning yourself before conflicts arise, not during them. If you know layoffs are coming, start building relationships with decision makers before your job is threatened. If you want a promotion, start taking on visible projects before the position opens up. If you need support for an idea, build alliances before you make your proposal. Physical positioning matters too. I always made sure I could see all the exits in any room and that my back wasn't to a door where enemies could surprise me. In modern life, this translates to practical strategies. Sit where you can see the whole room during important meetings. Position yourself near influential people during social events, and always have multiple options when entering any negotiation. But the most powerful positioning happens in people's minds. I worked constantly to position myself as the reasonable alternative, the problem solver, the person who could be trusted with sensitive information. When conflicts arose, people naturally turned to me for solutions because I had positioned myself as someone who put results above ego. You can build this same reputation by consistently being the person who asks good questions instead of making demands, who looks for win-win solutions instead of trying to win at others' expense, and who stays calm when others become emotional. This mental positioning gives you influence that no amount of arguing or pressure could achieve. Remember, you don't need to be the strongest person in the room if you're in the right position. You don't need to have the best arguments if you've positioned the conversation correctly. Master the art of positioning, and you'll find that most of your battles win themselves. My surprise attack plans weren't about violence. They were about doing the unexpected to change the entire dynamic of a conflict. The most powerful surprise isn't a sudden assault. It's a response so different from what people expect that it completely disrupts their strategy. I remember facing an opponent famous for his intimidation tactics. He would shout, threaten, and try to make others back down through fear. Everyone who dealt with him either shouted back, which gave him the fight he wanted, or cowered, which gave him the submission he craved. Both responses fed his power. When he tried his intimidation routine on me, I did something completely unexpected. I thanked him for his passion and asked him to help me understand his concerns better. He was so surprised that he actually stopped shouting and started explaining his position. Within minutes, we were having a productive conversation instead of a screaming match. This taught me that the power of surprise lies in refusing to play the game others expect you to play. When someone is aggressive, they expect you to be aggressive back or to retreat. When someone is passive-aggressive, they expect you to either ignore it or confront them directly. When someone is trying to make you jealous, they expect you to either compete or withdraw. Do the opposite of what they expect, and you immediately gain control of the situation. I developed several unexpected responses that consistently disarmed difficult people. When someone accused me of making a mistake, instead of defending myself, I would say, "You might be right. Help me understand what you think I should have done differently." This response was so unexpected that accusers often ended up helping me solve the problem instead of attacking me for it. When someone tried to take credit for my work, instead of fighting them publicly, I would privately thank them for their interest and ask them to collaborate on the next phase. This unexpected response either turned them into genuine collaborators or made them uncomfortable enough to stop stealing credit. Silence is one of the most powerful surprise weapons. When someone expects you to argue, react, or defend yourself, saying nothing and just looking at them calmly creates such discomfort that they often reveal their true motivations or back down entirely. I won many negotiations simply by staying quiet when others expected me to speak. Unexpected kindness is another devastating surprise tactic. When someone is prepared for you to be defensive or hostile, responding with genuine concern for their well-being or appreciation for their perspective completely disrupts their attack plan. They came prepared for war and found someone offering friendship instead. But timing is crucial with surprise tactics. The element of surprise only works if people have formed expectations about how you'll respond. If you're always unpredictable, you just seem unstable. The key is being consistent enough that people think they know you, then surprising them at strategic moments. I also learned that the best surprises create positive outcomes for everyone involved. Surprising someone by helping them solve their problem is more powerful than surprising them with an attack. Surprising someone by giving them more than they expected builds stronger relationships than surprising them by withholding what they wanted. The goal isn't to be random or confusing, it's to be strategically unexpected in ways that serve your larger objectives. Use surprise to diffuse conflicts, build relationships, and create opportunities, not just to keep people guessing about your next move. My military timing hourglass taught me that there are moments when immediate action wins everything, and moments when patience accomplishes what force never could. The difference between victory and defeat often comes down to recognizing which moment you're in. I learned this during a territorial dispute where both sides were preparing for battle. My advisors urged immediate attack while we had the advantage, but something felt wrong about the timing. I decided to wait one more day. That night, internal conflicts erupted in the enemy camp, and by morning, half their forces had deserted. What would have been a costly battle became a peaceful occupation. This taught me that timing matters more than effort in most situations. You can have the perfect strategy, the right resources, and superior positioning, but if your timing is wrong, everything fails. Conversely, even a mediocre plan executed at the perfect moment can succeed brilliantly. In your daily life, this means learning to read the rhythm of situations and people. Is your boss stressed about quarterly reports right now? Then it's not the time to ask for a raise, no matter how much you deserve it. Wait until after the reports are submitted and the pressure is off. Is your spouse tired after a difficult day? Then it's not the moment to discuss weekend plans or household problems. I developed what I call opportunity recognition, the ability to spot moments when people are most receptive to change. These moments usually come right after successes, when people feel confident and optimistic, or right after failures, when they're motivated to try something different. During stable periods, people resist change because they don't see the need for it. Sometimes speed is your ally. When someone offers you an opportunity, taking too long to decide can cost you the chance entirely. When someone is upset and needs support, responding immediately shows that you care more than a perfect response delivered too late. When you see a problem developing, addressing it quickly prevents it from becoming a crisis. But patience is equally powerful. I once waited 6 months to address a problem with a subordinate who was undermining my authority. Everyone expected me to act immediately, but I recognized that he was going through personal difficulties that were affecting his judgment. By waiting and supporting him through his troubles, I turned a potential enemy into a loyal ally who never caused problems again. The key is learning to distinguish between problems that get worse with time and problems that resolve themselves with time. Misunderstandings usually get worse. If left alone, they need quick clarification. But emotional reactions often cool down naturally if you give people space to process their feelings. I also learned to create urgency when it served my purposes and remove urgency when it didn't. When I needed quick decisions, I would emphasize deadlines and consequences. When I needed thoughtful consideration, I would remove time pressure and encourage careful analysis. Remember, there's a season for every strategy. Sometimes you must strike while the iron is hot. Sometimes you must wait for the iron to heat up. Wisdom lies in knowing which moment you're in. My spy network communication system was built on a simple principle. Knowledge is the most powerful weapon, but only if you know how to gather it without people realizing what you're doing. In your daily life, information warfare isn't about espionage, it's about understanding the hidden dynamics that drive every situation you encounter. Most people gather information by asking direct questions, which immediately puts others on guard. Instead, I learned to use what I call invisible intelligence gathering. I would ask questions that seemed casual but revealed crucial information. Instead of asking, "Are you planning to challenge my decision?" I would ask, "What concerns do you think the team might have about this approach?" The second question gets the same information without triggering defensiveness. The power of listening cannot be overstated. I won more battles through conversations than through combat, because people tell you everything you need to know if you just pay attention. They reveal their fears when they talk about what keeps them up at night. They show their ambitions when they describe what success looks like to them. They expose their weaknesses when they explain what frustrates them most. In office politics, this means being the person others confide in, rather than the person others complain about. When colleagues feel comfortable sharing their thoughts with you, you understand the real dynamics of your workplace, not just the official version presented in meetings. You learn who really makes decisions, what unspoken rules actually matter, and which conflicts are brewing before they explode. I developed techniques for encouraging people to share information naturally. First, I would share something slightly vulnerable about myself, which created psychological permission for them to do the same. Second, I would ask follow-up questions that showed genuine interest in their perspective, not just information I could use. Third, I would summarize what they told me to prove I was really listening, which made them more likely to trust me with additional details. But gathering information is only half the battle. You must also protect your own. I learned to control what information I shared, when I shared it, and with whom. Some information should be shared widely to build trust and relationships. Other information should be kept private to maintain strategic advantages. The key is being intentional about what you reveal, rather than just talking openly about everything. Questions are your most powerful tools for gathering intelligence. Instead of making statements that people can argue with, ask questions that make them think and reveal their true positions. What do you think would happen if we tried that approach? Tells you much more than I think we should try this approach ever could. I also learned to pay attention to what people don't say, the topics they avoid, the questions they deflect, the situations that make them uncomfortable. These silences often contain the most valuable information. When someone consistently changes the subject every time a particular issue comes up, that issue is probably more important than anything they're willing to discuss directly. Body language and tone reveal information that words try to hide. When someone says they're fine with a decision, but their posture is tense and their voice is tight, they're not fine at all. When someone claims to support your idea, but can't make eye contact while saying it, their support is questionable. Remember, in information warfare, the goal isn't to manipulate people, but to understand reality clearly enough to make good decisions. When you understand what people really want, what they really fear, and what they really believe, you can navigate any situation with wisdom instead of just hoping for the best. My spy network communication system was built on a simple principle. Knowledge is the most powerful weapon, but only if you know how to gather it without people realizing what you're doing. In your daily life, information warfare isn't about espionage, it's about understanding the hidden dynamics that drive every situation you encounter. Most people gather information by asking direct questions, which immediately puts others on guard. Instead, I learned to use what I call invisible intelligence gathering. I would ask questions that seemed casual but revealed crucial information. Instead of asking, "Are you planning to challenge my decision?" I would ask, "What concerns do you think the team might have about this approach?" The second question gets the same information without triggering defensiveness. The power of listening cannot be overstated. I won more battles through conversations than through combat because people tell you everything you need to know if you just pay attention. They reveal their fears when they talk about what keeps them up at night. They show their ambitions when they describe what success looks like to them. They expose their weaknesses when they explain what frustrates them most. In office politics, this means being the person others confide in, rather than the person others complain about. When colleagues feel comfortable sharing their thoughts with you, you understand the real dynamics of your workplace, not just the official version presented in meetings. You learn who really makes decisions, what unspoken rules actually matter, and which conflicts are brewing before they explode. I developed techniques for encouraging people to share information naturally. First, I would share something slightly vulnerable about myself, which created psychological permission for them to do the same. Second, I would ask follow-up questions that showed genuine interest in their perspective, not just information I could use. Third, I would summarize what they told me to prove I was really listening, which made them more likely to trust me with additional details. But gathering information is only half the battle. You must also protect your own. I learned to control what information I shared, when I shared it, and with whom. Some information should be shared widely to build trust and relationships. Other information should be kept private to maintain strategic advantages. The key is being intentional about what you reveal, rather than just talking openly about everything. Questions are your most powerful tools for gathering intelligence. Instead of making statements that people can argue with, ask questions that make them think and reveal their true positions. What do you think would happen if we tried that approach? Tells you much more than I think we should try this approach ever could. I also learned to pay attention to what people don't say, the topics they avoid, the questions they deflect, the situations that make them uncomfortable. These silences often contain the most valuable information. When someone consistently changes the subject every time a particular issue comes up, that issue is probably more important than anything they're willing to discuss directly. Body language and tone reveal information that words try to hide. When someone says they're fine with a decision but their posture is tense and their voice is tight, they're not fine at all. When someone claims to support your idea but can't make eye contact while saying it, their support is questionable. Remember, in information warfare, the goal isn't to manipulate people, but to understand reality clearly enough to make good decisions. When you understand what people really want, what they really fear, and what they really believe, you can navigate any situation with wisdom instead of just hoping for the best. The most sophisticated information gathering happens through what I call strategic empathy, genuinely caring about understanding others' perspectives, not to exploit them, but to find solutions that work for everyone. When people feel truly heard and understood, they naturally share more information and become more open to collaboration. I learned to create information flow maps in my mind, tracking how information moved through organizations and social groups. Who talks to whom? Who influences whom? Who has access to what kind of information? Understanding these patterns helped me know where to go for accurate intelligence and how to ensure important information reached the right people. Timing your information gathering is crucial. People are more open during certain emotional states and less guarded in specific situations. I found that moments of transition after meetings, during casual conversations, when people were celebrating successes or processing setbacks, yielded the most honest insights. But perhaps most importantly, I learned that becoming a trusted repository of information gives you power that no amount of force could achieve. When you're known as someone who keeps confidences, provides accurate information, and uses knowledge responsibly, people naturally turn to you for advice and include you in important discussions. My commander's decision tablet contained one of the most important principles I ever learned. Divided attention leads to defeat in everything you attempt. An army with two generals giving conflicting orders will lose to a smaller army with clear, unified leadership. The same principle applies to your personal life when your attention is scattered across too many priorities. You fail at all of them. I learned this lesson painfully when I tried to manage 3 different conflicts simultaneously. I thought I was being efficient by multitasking, but instead, I was giving each situation only partial attention. I missed crucial details in one negotiation because I was thinking about strategy for another battle. I failed to follow through on commitments because I was overwhelmed by competing demands. What should have been 3 victories became 3 mediocre outcomes. That failure taught me the power of unity of command, not just in leading others, but in leading myself. I developed what I call decisive focus, the ability to identify the most important objective in any situation and commit fully to achieving it before moving on to the next priority. This doesn't mean ignoring everything else, but it does mean having clear hierarchies of importance. When multiple demands compete for your attention, you must decide which one deserves your best thinking and energy. Half-hearted effort on 5 projects produces less value than focused effort on 2 projects completed excellently. I created a simple system for maintaining unity of command in my own life. Each morning, I would identify the one thing that, if accomplished well, would make the day successful regardless of what else happened. This became my primary mission. Everything else was secondary. This focus allowed me to make better decisions, because I always knew what my real priority was. Leading others requires the same clarity. People need to understand not just what you want them to do, but why it matters and how their individual efforts contribute to the larger objective. I learned that confusion about priorities creates more problems than lack of resources ever could. When I gave orders, I always explained the reasoning behind them. This wasn't just about being respectful or strategic. When people understand the why behind instructions, they can adapt those instructions to changing circumstances without losing sight of the ultimate goal. When they only know the what, they become helpless when situations change. I also learned the importance of consistent communication. Mixed messages destroy unity of command faster than enemy attacks. If you tell someone that quality is the top priority on Monday but complain about slow progress on Tuesday, you've created internal conflict that weakens their effectiveness. Your team will spend energy trying to guess what you really want, instead of focusing on delivering results. The principle extends to family relationships as well. When parents give conflicting guidance, children learn to play one parent against the other instead of developing clear values. When spouses have different priorities but don't discuss them openly, every decision becomes a potential conflict instead of a shared objective. But unity of command doesn't mean being inflexible or authoritarian. The best leaders create unity around objectives and principles, while allowing flexibility in methods and tactics. I would tell my officers what needed to be accomplished and why it mattered, then trust them to figure out the best way to make it happen, given their local knowledge and resources. This approach builds stronger teams because people feel ownership of solutions rather than just compliance with orders. When someone understands your ultimate objective, they can often find better ways to achieve it than you originally envisioned. Remember, clarity is kindness, and confusion is cruelty. When you're clear about what matters most and communicate that clarity consistently, you give others the gift of focused effort. When you're scattered or unclear, you force others to waste energy guessing what you really want instead of delivering what you actually need. I also discovered that unity of command requires what I call aligned autonomy, giving people clear boundaries within which they can make independent decisions. This approach multiplies your effectiveness because others can act decisively without constantly seeking approval, while still working toward your shared objectives. The most powerful aspect of unity of command is modeling the behavior you want to see. When I remained calm under pressure, my officers learned to do the same. When I made decisions quickly and confidently, they developed similar decisiveness. When I admitted mistakes and adjusted course when necessary, they felt safe to bring me problems instead of hiding them. Creating accountability systems became essential for maintaining unity of command across larger groups. People need to know not just what success looks like, but how progress will be measured and what consequences follow from different levels of performance. Clear expectations eliminate confusion and reduce the need for constant supervision. Finally, I learned that true unity of command comes from inspiring people to want what you want, not just forcing them to do what you say. When others understand how achieving your objectives will benefit them personally, unity of command becomes natural rather than forced. This alignment of interests creates the strongest possible foundation for sustained success. My flexible formation manual taught me that rigid thinking loses to flexible response every time. Water defeats rock not through hardness, but through persistence and adaptability. Water finds every crack, flows around every obstacle, and eventually shapes the landscape to its will. This became my model for strategic thinking. I once spent months developing the perfect battle plan, accounting for every variable I could imagine. When the actual conflict began, my opponents did something completely unexpected that made my entire strategy useless. I had two choices: stubbornly stick to my original plan and probably lose, or adapt quickly to the new reality and find a different path to victory. I chose adaptation. Within hours, I had developed a completely new approach that turned my opponent's surprise move into an advantage for my forces. The victory taught me that flexibility isn't about abandoning your goals, it's about finding new ways to achieve them when circumstances change. This principle applies to every area of your life. Your goal might be to advance your career, but the method for achieving that goal might need to change when your company restructures, when new technology disrupts your industry, or when your personal circumstances shift. The person who adapts their approach while maintaining their purpose outlasts the person who rigidly sticks to outdated methods. I learned to distinguish between principles and tactics. My principles: treating people with respect, seeking win-win solutions, thinking strategically rather than reactively, remained constant regardless of circumstances. But my tactics changed constantly based on what each situation required. Sometimes this meant being patient when I preferred action. Sometimes it meant being direct when I preferred diplomacy. Sometimes it meant accepting short-term setbacks to achieve long-term objectives. The key was staying true to my ultimate purpose, while being completely flexible about methods. Reading changing situations became one of my most valuable skills. I learned to recognize early warning signs that my current approach wasn't working. People stopped responding enthusiastically to my suggestions. Results began declining despite increased efforts, or new obstacles kept appearing faster than I could overcome them. When I noticed these signs, I would step back and reassess the entire situation. What had changed since I developed my original approach? What new information was available? What assumptions was I making that might no longer be valid? This analysis usually revealed better paths forward, but adaptability requires emotional flexibility as well as strategic flexibility. I had to learn to let go of approaches I was attached to when they stopped serving my larger purposes. This was especially difficult when I had invested significant time and energy in developing particular strategies. I developed what I call strategic detachment, the ability to hold my methods lightly while holding my goals firmly. This meant being willing to abandon tactics that weren't working, even if I was proud of them, in favor of new approaches that better served my objectives. The balance between consistency and flexibility is crucial. People need to trust that your core values and ultimate objectives remain stable, but they also need to see that you can adapt your methods when circumstances require it. This combination creates confidence in your leadership while demonstrating wisdom in your approach. Remember, the strongest trees bend in storms rather than breaking. Your principles should be your roots deep and unmovable. Your tactics should be your branches flexible enough to move with changing winds while still reaching toward the light. Developing what I call adaptive intelligence became one of my greatest advantages. This meant constantly scanning for changes in my environment, competitors, and circumstances that might require tactical adjustments. I would regularly ask myself, what's different today than it was last month? What assumptions am I making that might no longer be valid? What new opportunities have emerged that I haven't noticed yet? I also learned to build flexibility into my plans from the beginning. Instead of creating rigid strategies that could only work under specific conditions, I would develop multiple pathways to my objectives and identify decision points where I could switch approaches based on how situations developed. The emotional challenge of adaptability cannot be understated. Pride makes us want to stick with approaches that have worked before, even when circumstances have changed. Fear makes us cling to familiar methods, even when they're no longer effective. Learning to let go of strategies I was attached to became as important as developing new ones. I created what I called adaptation triggers, specific signs that would automatically prompt me to reconsider my current approach when I encountered unexpected resistance, when results declined despite increased effort, or when new information contradicted my assumptions. I would stop pushing forward and step back to reassess the entire situation. This practice of strategic pause and reassessment saved me from countless mistakes and revealed opportunities that pure persistence would have missed. Adaptability isn't just about changing when you have to, it's about changing before you have to, while you still have the advantage of choice, rather than being forced to react to crisis. My terrain analysis map revealed something that most people overlook. Your environment shapes the outcome of every interaction more than your words or intentions do. The same conversation that fails in one setting can succeed brilliantly in another. Learning to use your surroundings as a strategic ally transforms how effectively you can influence others. I learned this during a crucial negotiation that was going nowhere. We were meeting in my opponent's headquarters, surrounded by symbols of his power and authority. Every time I made a suggestion, he became more defensive and domineering. The environment was reinforcing his sense of superiority and my position as a petitioner, asking for favors. I suggested we continue our discussion while walking through a neutral garden. The change was remarkable. Away from the trappings of his office, he became more collaborative and open to compromise. The peaceful setting encouraged thoughtful conversation rather than power posturing. We reached agreement within an hour on issues we had been fighting about for days. This taught me to always consider the psychological impact of physical spaces. Where you hold important conversations matters as much as what you say during them. Your home gives you natural confidence and control. Someone else's office puts you in a subordinate position. Neutral locations create equality and encourage cooperation. I began choosing meeting locations strategically based on what I wanted to accomplish. For difficult conversations that required vulnerability and trust, I preferred comfortable, private spaces with soft seating and warm lighting. For negotiations that required focus and efficiency, I chose simple rooms with minimal distractions and formal seating arrangements. Even small, environmental details make a difference. I learned to arrive early so I could choose seating that gave me advantages. Facing the door so I could see who entered, near a window for natural light that made me more visible, or across from rather than next to someone when I needed to read their facial expressions carefully. The principle extends beyond physical spaces to social environments. The same person who argues with you in front of their peers might agree with you in private, where they don't have to worry about losing face. Someone who resists your ideas during stressful periods might embrace them when they're relaxed and confident. I developed what I call environmental intelligence, the ability to read how different settings affect people's behavior and choose contexts that serve my objectives. Some people are more receptive to new ideas early in the morning when their mental energy is high. Others are more flexible in the evening when they're tired of fighting. Some respond better to formal business settings that signal importance, while others prefer casual environments that feel less threatening. Creating favorable conditions before conflicts arise became one of my most powerful strategies. Instead of waiting for problems to develop and then trying to solve them, I would structure situations to prevent problems from occurring in the first place. This meant scheduling difficult conversations when people were most likely to be reasonable, choosing locations that encouraged cooperation rather than confrontation, and timing important requests for moments when others were most likely to be receptive. Your environment includes the people around you as well as the physical space. Having supportive allies present during important discussions can shift the entire dynamic in your favor, while being surrounded by opponents makes even reasonable requests seem unreasonable. Remember, you don't need to win every battle through superior arguments if you can win them through superior positioning. Master your environment, and you'll find that many conflicts resolve themselves before they even begin. The psychological impact of environmental control extends far beyond just choosing meeting locations. I learned to create what I call influence atmospheres, environments that naturally encourage the behaviors and attitudes I wanted to see. This might mean playing specific music that created energy or calm, adjusting lighting to make people feel more alert or relaxed, or arranging spaces to encourage collaboration rather than competition. Temperature and comfort levels also affect how people think and behave. I discovered that slightly cool environments keep people more alert and focused, while warmer settings make them more relaxed and social. Comfortable seating encourages longer, more thoughtful discussions, while slightly uncomfortable conditions motivate quicker decisions. I also learned to use what I call territorial psychology to my advantage. People feel more confident and secure in spaces they consider their own, and more deferential in spaces that belong to others. By choosing neutral territories for important negotiations, I could level the psychological playing field and encourage more balanced discussions. Principle of environmental design became especially powerful when applied to ongoing relationships. I would pay attention to which settings brought out the best in different people and try to have important conversations with them in those environments. Some people were more creative in natural settings, others more focused in structured environments, and others more open in social atmospheres. Creating positive environmental memories also became a strategic tool. When I associated important relationships with pleasant settings and positive experiences, those associations would influence how people felt about working with me in the future. The person who remembers solving problems with you in beautiful, comfortable environments will naturally look forward to future collaborations. My resource allocation abacus tracked something more valuable than gold or weapons: the energy, time, and attention that determine victory or defeat in every endeavor. Most people lose, not because they lack ability, but because they waste their most precious resources on battles that don't matter, while having nothing left for opportunities that could change their lives. I learned this lesson when I nearly lost a war, despite having superior forces. I had been fighting every small skirmish, responding to every provocation, and trying to control every detail of my campaign. By the time the decisive battle arrived, my army was exhausted, my supplies were depleted, and my attention was scattered across a dozen minor concerns. My opponent, meanwhile, had been strategically passive for months. He ignored small provocations, avoided unnecessary engagements, and focused all his resources on preparing for the one battle that would determine the outcome of the entire conflict. When that moment came, he was fresh and focused while I was worn down and distracted. That defeat taught me to think like an investor rather than a spender when it comes to my personal resources. Every time you say yes to something, whether it's a meeting, a project, a social obligation, or even a worry, you're investing your limited supply of energy, time, and attention. The question isn't whether each individual investment is worthwhile, but whether it's the best possible use of your resources, given your larger objectives. I developed what I call resource budgeting. Just as I wouldn't spend my army's food supplies carelessly, I learned not to spend my mental and emotional energy carelessly. I started each day by identifying which activities would produce the highest return on my investment of time and attention, then protected those priorities from less important demands. This meant saying no to good opportunities so I could say yes to great ones. It meant ignoring minor problems that would resolve themselves so I could focus on major problems that required my direct attention. It meant accepting that I couldn't do everything perfectly so I could do the most important things excellently. The strategic use of rest became one of my most powerful tactics. While my enemies exhausted themselves with constant activity, I would withdraw periodically to recharge my energy and reassess my strategy. These periods of apparent inactivity often produced my greatest insights and prepared me for my most important victories. I also learned to recognize and avoid energy drains activities, people, and situations that consumed resources without producing proportional returns. Some battles drain you regardless of whether you win or lose them. Some relationships require constant energy maintenance without providing support when you need it. Some worries consume attention without enabling any productive action. The key is being ruthlessly honest about what deserves your best resources and what deserves only your leftover capacity. Your most important goals should get your peak energy during your most productive hours. Everything else should be handled when you're operating at less than full capacity. Remember, you can't manage what you don't measure. Start tracking how you actually spend your time, energy, and attention versus how you think you spend them. The gap between perception and reality is usually where your greatest opportunities for improvement lie hidden. Developed what I call energy accounting. Not just how I spent my time, but how different activities affected my capacity for future performance. Some tasks that took only an hour would drain my energy for the rest of the day, while others that took several hours would actually increase my enthusiasm and capability. Learning to recognize these patterns allowed me to sequence my activities strategically. I would schedule energy-draining tasks during periods when I had surplus capacity and save energy-generating activities for times when I needed to recover from demanding periods. The compound interest of resource management became clear over time. Small improvements in how I allocated my attention and energy created dramatic differences in my overall effectiveness. The person who wastes 20 minutes a day loses over 100 hours per year time that could have been invested in skill development, relationship building, or strategic planning. I also learned that resource management isn't just about individual productivity, it's about creating sustainable systems that prevent burnout and maintain high performance over long periods. This meant building regular recovery time into my schedule, developing multiple sources of energy and motivation, and creating backup plans for when my primary resources were depleted. The strategic use of other people's resources became equally important. Instead of trying to do everything myself, I learned to identify who had the skills, knowledge, connections, or energy needed for specific objectives and find ways to align their resources with my goals. This multiplication effect allowed me to achieve far more than I could have accomplished through individual effort alone. Finally, I discovered that teaching resource management to others created a compound benefit. When everyone around me became more strategic about their time and energy allocation, the entire group's effectiveness improved, which made my own objectives easier to achieve. My mind influence technique scroll contained methods for winning hearts and minds that proved more powerful than any weapon I ever wielded. The greatest battles are fought not on physical terrain, but in the landscape of human psychology. Understanding this mental dimension of conflict transforms you from someone who merely reacts to situations into someone who shapes them. Most people focus entirely on the surface level of their interactions, what they're going to say, what arguments they'll make, what facts they'll present. But the real battle happens in the subconscious realm of emotions, perceptions, and psychological triggers. Win the mental game, and the surface conversation becomes almost irrelevant. I learned this when facing an opponent who seemed impossible to influence through logic or negotiation. Every reasonable argument I made was met with unreasonable resistance. Every compromise I offered was rejected without consideration. I realized I was fighting the wrong battle. I was trying to change his mind when I should have been trying to change how he felt about the situation. Instead of presenting more facts, I started addressing his emotional state. I acknowledged his concerns, validated his expertise, and demonstrated respect for his position, even while disagreeing with his conclusions. Within days, the same person who had been completely inflexible began offering creative solutions that served both our interests. This taught me that people make decisions with their emotions, and then use logic to justify those decisions afterward. If you can't influence how someone feels about a situation, all the logical arguments in the world won't change their behavior. But if you can shift their emotional state, they'll often find logical reasons to support what you want them to do. Projecting confidence and competence became one of my most powerful tools. People naturally defer to those who seem certain about their direction and capable of achieving their goals. But confidence isn't about being loud or aggressive, it's about being calm under pressure, speaking clearly about your objectives, and demonstrating competence through consistent small actions rather than dramatic gestures. I developed techniques for staying calm when others tried to provoke emotional reactions from me. When someone attacked my competence publicly, instead of defending myself defensively, I would pause, acknowledge their concern, and then calmly explain my reasoning. This response made them look petty while making me appear thoughtful and professional. Using others' expectations against them became another valuable strategy. When people expect you to be defensive, being curious instead completely disrupts their attack plan. When they expect you to argue, asking questions makes them defend their position instead. When they expect you to be intimidated, remaining relaxed and friendly makes them question their own aggressive approach. Reputation management proved to be the ultimate form of psychological warfare. I worked constantly to build a reputation for being reasonable, reliable, and beneficial to work with. This reputation preceded me into every new situation, making people more likely to give me the benefit of the doubt and more willing to find mutually beneficial solutions. But the most important psychological battle is the one you fight with yourself. Your internal state determines how others perceive and respond to you. If you feel desperate, others sense it and take advantage. If you feel confident in your value, others treat you accordingly. If you approach interactions with genuine curiosity about finding solutions, others become more collaborative. I learned to manage my own psychological state before trying to influence others. This meant developing routines for staying centered under pressure, techniques for maintaining perspective during setbacks, and practices for projecting the energy I wanted others to mirror back to me. Remember, perception becomes reality in human interactions. People respond more to how they feel about you than to what you actually say or do. Master the psychological dimension of your relationships, and you'll find that most of your practical objectives achieve themselves. The art of psychological positioning became one of my most sophisticated skills. This involved not just managing how others perceived me, but actively shaping the mental frameworks they used to interpret situations. When I could influence the categories people used to think about problems, I could guide them toward solutions that served my objectives while feeling completely natural to them. I learned to use what psychologists call priming, subtly introducing concepts, emotions, or ideas into conversations that would influence how people approached subsequent decisions. If I wanted someone to be more collaborative, I would begin our interaction by discussing successful partnerships. If I needed them to think more creatively, I would start by acknowledging innovative solutions they had developed in the past. The power of story became evident as I refined these techniques. People remember stories far better than abstract principles, and they use those stories as templates for understanding new situations. By sharing carefully chosen anecdotes that illustrated the outcomes I wanted to encourage, I could guide others towards similar decisions without appearing to pressure them. Social proof and authority became powerful tools for psychological influence. People naturally look to others for cues about appropriate behavior, especially in uncertain situations. By demonstrating that respected individuals had chosen approaches similar to what I was proposing, I could make those approaches seem more attractive and legitimate. But the most powerful psychological warfare happens at the level of identity and values. When I could connect my objectives to people's sense of who they were and what they stood for, resistance typically dissolved. Instead of asking them to do something that conflicted with their self-image, I would frame requests in ways that allowed them to act consistently with their deepest values and aspirations. The long-term impact of psychological mastery extends far beyond individual interactions. When you consistently help people feel competent, respected, and valued, you build what I call psychological capital, a reservoir of goodwill and trust that makes future influence efforts exponentially more effective. My Alliance Treaty collection proved that no one achieves lasting success completely alone. The strongest fortress can be conquered if it stands isolated, but even a modest position becomes impregnable when supported by loyal allies. In your daily life, the relationships you build determine what becomes possible for you to achieve. I learned this during my most difficult campaign, when I was outnumbered 3-1 by enemies who had superior resources and better strategic positions. Victory seemed impossible until I realized that my opponents had made the same mistake I had made earlier in my career. They had focused on building strength while neglecting to build relationships. Instead of attacking them directly, I began reaching out to neutral parties who had been harmed by my enemy's aggressive expansion. I offered protection, shared resources, and proposed mutual defense agreements that benefited everyone involved except my original opponents. Within months, the balance of power had shifted completely. My enemies found themselves isolated, while I commanded a coalition that was stronger than any single army. This taught me that identifying and cultivating useful relationships isn't about manipulation, It's about recognizing mutual interests and creating value for others while advancing your own objectives. The best alliances benefit everyone involved, which makes them stable and lasting. I developed a systematic approach to relationship building. First, I would identify people whose success would support my own goals and whose goals I could genuinely help advance. Second, I would look for small ways to provide value before asking for anything in return. Third, I would maintain regular contact even when I didn't need immediate assistance, because relationships require ongoing investment to remain strong. Building trust became my highest priority in every new relationship. Trust isn't built through grand gestures, but through consistent reliability in small matters. When I said I would do something, I did it exactly as promised. When I shared information, it was accurate. When I made commitments, I honored them even when circumstances changed and it became inconvenient. But trust alone isn't enough. You must also demonstrate loyalty. I learned to defend my allies when they weren't present to defend themselves, to share credit generously when things went well, and to take responsibility when shared projects encountered problems. This loyalty was almost always reciprocated when I needed support. Managing multiple relationships without creating conflicts required careful attention to each person's interests and sensitivities. I learned to avoid placing allies in situations where they had to choose between supporting me and maintaining other important relationships. I also made sure that my success enhanced rather than threatened the success of people I depended on. The long-term benefits of helping others succeed proved to be one of my most valuable strategies. When I helped someone achieve their goals, they didn't just feel grateful, they became invested in my success because our victories were connected. This created a network of people who actively looked for opportunities to support my objectives, because doing so served their own interests as well. I also learned to recognize and gracefully distance myself from relationships that had become one-sided or toxic. Some people take more energy than they provide, create more problems than they solve, or demand loyalty without offering it in return. Maintaining these relationships out of obligation or guilt weakens your ability to support the allies who truly matter. Remember, your network is your net worth, but only if you approach relationships with genuine interest in others' success rather than just your own. Build bridges before you need to cross them, and you'll find that most of your biggest opportunities come through people who want to see you succeed. The concept of relationship portfolios became central to my strategic thinking. Just as I wouldn't put all my military resources in one location, I learned not to depend entirely on one type of relationship or one circle of allies. I cultivated connections across different levels of power, various areas of expertise, and multiple spheres of influence. This diversification proved invaluable when circumstances changed. When political winds shifted and some of my original allies found themselves out of favor, I had relationships with their replacements. When new challenges arose that required unfamiliar expertise, I could access knowledge through my extended network rather than starting from scratch. I also developed what I call relationship maintenance systems, structured approaches to staying connected with important people even when I didn't have immediate business with them. This meant remembering important dates, following up on their major projects, introducing them to others who could help them, and finding excuses to provide value even when they hadn't asked for assistance. The principle of reciprocal value creation became my most powerful relationship tool. Instead of keeping score of who owed what to whom, I focused on creating situations where everyone's success was interconnected. When helping someone achieve their goals directly contributed to my own objectives, the relationship became rather than requiring constant maintenance. Strategic vulnerability also played a crucial role in deepening relationships. By carefully sharing my own challenges, uncertainties, and failures at appropriate times. I created permission for others to be authentic with me. These moments of mutual vulnerability often transformed professional relationships into personal alliances that could weather significant storms. Finally, I learned that the quality of relationships matters more than the quantity. A small network of people who genuinely trust and support you will accomplish more than a large network of superficial connections. Focus on depth over breadth, and invest the time needed to build relationships that can survive stress and change. My victory preservation guide taught me that winning is easier than keeping what you've won. I watched many capable leaders achieve brilliant victories only to lose everything through poor consolidation. They assumed that success would maintain itself, but victory creates new challenges that require different strategies than those used to achieve the original win. I learned this lesson after my greatest military triumph, when I had defeated a coalition of enemies and gained control of valuable territory. Intoxicated by success, I relaxed my vigilance and reduced my strategic focus. I assumed that my defeated opponents would accept their losses and move on to other pursuits. Instead, they used their defeat as motivation to reorganize, form new alliances, and develop better strategies. While I was celebrating, they were learning from their mistakes and preparing for their next attempt. Within 2 years, they had recovered their strength and mounted a coordinated counterattack that nearly cost me everything I had gained. That near disaster taught me that victory consolidation requires as much strategic thinking as winning the original battle. You must secure your position, build upon your success, and prepare for the inevitable attempts to reverse your gains. The first principle of victory consolidation is avoiding the mistakes that turn wins into losses. Success often breeds overconfidence, which leads to taking unnecessary risks or neglecting the careful planning that created the original victory. I learned to maintain the same disciplined approach after winning that I had used while fighting for the win. Another common mistake is failing to build on success while you have momentum. Victory creates opportunities that don't last forever. Credibility with superiors, goodwill from colleagues, access to resources, and influence over decisions. You must use these advantages quickly before they dissipate, because success that isn't leveraged often becomes just a pleasant memory. I developed specific strategies for securing my position after achieving important goals. First, I would document what had worked so I could repeat successful approaches in future situations. Second, I would identify which relationships had been crucial to my success and invest in strengthening them further. Third, I would look for ways to expand my victory into related areas while the conditions that enabled my success were still present. Gracious winning became one of my most important skills. How you treat people after defeating them determines whether they become permanent enemies seeking revenge or potential allies who respect your success. I learned to acknowledge my opponent's strengths, show appreciation for worthy competition, and offer face-saving explanations for their defeats when possible. This approach served my long-term interests because it reduced the number of people actively working against me while increasing the number willing to work with me in future situations. Vindictive winners create determined enemies, while gracious winners often convert former opponents into reluctant admirers. The importance of continuous improvement became clear as I maintained success over time. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow because conditions change, opponents adapt, and new challenges emerge. I made it a practice to regularly reassess my strategies and look for ways to strengthen my position even when things were going well. Remember, victory is not a destination but a temporary position that must be defended and developed. Treat your successes as foundations for future achievements rather than endpoints, and you'll find that each win makes the next one more achievable. The psychology of post-victory behavior became a crucial area of study for me. Success often triggers unconscious changes in how people approach challenges. They become more risk-averse because they have something to lose, more complacent because they assume their successful methods will continue working, and more isolated because others begin to perceive them differently. I learned to actively counter these psychological traps by maintaining what I call learner's mindset even after major victories. This meant continuing to seek feedback, staying curious about new approaches, and remaining humble about what I didn't know. Success that makes you stop learning is success that won't last. Building institutional memory became another crucial aspect of victory consolidation. I would document not just what we had accomplished, but how we had accomplished it, what conditions had enabled our success, which relationships had been crucial, what external factors had worked in our favor. This knowledge became invaluable for replicating success in new contexts. The strategic use of success momentum proved to be one of my most powerful tools. Victory creates temporary windows of opportunity when people are more willing to trust your judgment, when resources are more readily available, and when ambitious goals seem achievable. I learned to identify these windows and act quickly to lock in additional advantages before the momentum dissipated. I also developed practices for what I call success, resilience, building systems that could maintain my achievements even when I wasn't actively managing them. This meant creating processes that could run independently, developing other people who could carry forward my work, and establishing institutional culture that would preserve valuable practices. The paradox of success is that it often contains the seeds of future failure if not managed carefully. The very qualities that enabled victory: aggressive action, calculated risk-taking, innovative thinking, can become liabilities when applied inappropriately to post-victory situations that require different approaches. My wisdom transmission scroll contains the final teachings I want to leave for future generations. Because the greatest victory any person can achieve is creating value that outlasts their own lifetime. The principles I've shared with you today aren't just tactics for winning temporary battles. They're frameworks for living strategically that will serve you throughout your entire life. As I reflect on decades of applying these concepts, I see how they've evolved and deepened through constant use. What began as military strategies became life philosophies that guided my decisions in every area of human interaction. The same principles that helped me win battles also helped me build lasting relationships. The same approaches that conquered territories also conquered challenges in governance and diplomacy. This is what I want you to understand. Strategic thinking isn't something you turn on during conflicts and turn off during peaceful times. It's a way of approaching life that makes you more effective in everything you do. When you consistently think several moves ahead, understand other people's motivations, position yourself advantageously, and choose your battles wisely, you don't just win more often, you create a life of greater purpose and fulfillment. The importance of teaching these principles to others became clear to me late in my career. Knowledge that dies with its possessor benefits no one, but wisdom that is passed on multiplies its impact across generations. Every person you teach to think strategically becomes someone who can create positive change in their own sphere of influence. I encourage you to share what you've learned today with people who could benefit from these insights, not by lecturing them about strategy, but by demonstrating these principles through your own behavior. When others see you handling difficult situations with calm wisdom, achieving your goals without creating enemies, and building success that lasts, they'll naturally want to understand your approach. Adapting ancient wisdom to future challenges will require creativity and flexibility, but the fundamental principles remain constant. Human nature doesn't change. People still want to feel respected, understood, and valued. They still respond to incentives, still make decisions based on emotions, and still prefer cooperation to conflict when given attractive alternatives. What changes are the contexts in which these principles apply, the technologies you use, the organizations you navigate, and the specific challenges you face will be different from mine. But the underlying dynamics of influence, leadership, and strategic thinking remain the same. My final advice for living strategically every day is this: start small, but think big. Begin by applying these principles to minor interactions and everyday decisions. Practice reading people's motivations in low-stakes situations. Experiment with positioning strategies during casual conversations. Learn to choose your battles wisely in family discussions and workplace dynamics. As you develop confidence with these approaches, gradually apply them to more important situations. The skills you build through daily practice will be available when you face your most crucial challenges. Remember that mastery takes time. I didn't become an effective strategist overnight, and neither will you. But every small improvement in your strategic thinking creates compounding benefits over time. The person who consistently makes slightly better decisions than others around them will achieve dramatically better results over the course of a lifetime. Take action immediately. Choose one principle from today's discussion and commit to practicing it this week. Strategic thinking without strategic action is just interesting philosophy. Strategic action based on strategic thinking is how you transform your life and create the legacy you want to leave behind. The integration of these principles into daily life requires what I call strategic habits, automatic behaviors that consistently apply these concepts without requiring constant conscious effort. Start by choosing one principle that resonates most strongly with you and practice it until it becomes natural. Then gradually add others. I want you to understand that mastery of these principles isn't just about personal success, it's about contributing to a world where conflicts are resolved through wisdom rather than force, where leadership serves others rather than just the leader, and where strategic thinking creates value for everyone involved rather than zero-sum competition. The responsibility that comes with strategic knowledge is real. When you can influence outcomes more effectively, you bear greater responsibility for using that influence ethically. The same techniques that can help you achieve your goals can harm others if applied without consideration for their well-being and interests. As you develop these capabilities, remember that the ultimate measure of strategic success isn't how often you win, but how much value you create through your victories. The greatest strategists in history are remembered not for the opponents they defeated, but for the positive changes they made possible through their achievements. My final challenge to you is this: become someone whose success makes others more successful. Use these principles not just to get what you want, but to help others get what they need. Build victories that create more opportunities for everyone involved. Practice strategic thinking that elevates entire communities rather than just advancing individual interests. The art of war in everyday life isn't ultimately about warfare at odds, about the art of living wisely, influencing positively, and creating lasting value through strategic action. When you master these principles and apply them with wisdom and compassion, you don't just win your daily battles, you help build a world where fewer battles need to be fought. The choice is now yours. You have the knowledge. You understand the principles. The only question remaining is what you will choose to do with this wisdom. Make that choice now. Take that first action today, and begin the journey toward becoming the strategic leader your life and the world needs you to be.